I had Victor from, I think, Algeria ask if I can do a quick one on painted finches, and they're another one of my favourites. So I'm more than happy to do that. I don't have them at the moment. I've had some mishaps with some sort of tumour or disease that was passed on from bird to bird from the guy I got some of the birds from, and then the last remaining male I had that was mint. You'll see the footage of him. Snake got him. I had a snake issue for a bit, but I don't want to bring it up. So the painted finch is an Australian finch. It's pretty much from, say, central Queensland right through to the west coast on the other side of the, so central Queensland. So from about here, and then pretty much right through to the west coast. So, and it's like a broad band. It goes right through the top of, it goes right through the Northern Territory, right through Western Australia, and they go right to the west coast because their habitat is spinifex and rocky ground, and that's what you find out there until you hit the coast. So, and that's where you'll find the painteds. That's what they're adapted to. That's why they've got those long beaks. They can pick those seeds and out of the rocks and the cracks. Even their courtship is on the rocks and that. Like, they're a ground finch. In my experience, they nest on the ground. But this is where you'll find them. The temperature here, you know, in like central Queensland, right through the top of Australia to the west coast. Average daily temperatures 35, 30 degrees Celsius, right through to 40, 42, 45 degrees Celsius. So they can handle hot climate. That in their range, they probably only get about 300 mil or a foot of rain a year. So the rainfall is low. So they're not equipped to deal with damp conditions. So if you've got emblemas, dry. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. They don't like the moisture. But yeah, that's where you find them, and I'll talk a lot more about their breeding in a second. I'll just give you a quick update in the wild compared to in captivity, because it varies. In captivity, they've got the right conditions to breed almost all year round. In the wild, it's after the wet season, so January right through then to most of the year, half the year the painters will nest in the wild, and their nesting habitat it's pretty simple. They live in rocky, sort of slopey areas with their spinifex. It's dry country, and they nest in the spinifex. That's their main area, and because they do that, they've developed different nesting techniques. So what they do is, because they nest in the spinifex is a sharp, fast-growing grass. So to combat fresh spears coming up through the nest and spearing eggs and chicks, or even parents trying to nest, because they'll grow overnight. These spears will come to the nest. So they've developed a way of making a platform. So if you're going to offer building sites, keep them low to the ground. I've never had painted finches nest higher than my hip height. It's really low to the ground. That's usually what they're used to, and they'll nest on the ground if they've got it there. They'll nest in grass tree skirts, but they really like somewhere. They'll even nest in a pot on the ground. If there's a bit of straw there that they can work with, they like to nest close to the ground. And they will build a big platform. So if they do sometimes build up higher in the aviary, their platform can sometimes be so big the whole thing will bloody collapse before they can finish their nest. So keep that in mind if you're going to put platforms or nests for your painteds. Make sure they're sturdy, because they can really load in the dirt and the coal and the sticks and the dirt. They'll load it up. They'll make a platform. So in captivity, it's because like the Gouldian and the stars and all that, if the conditions are right, because they rely on the rains, you can almost breed the emblemas or the painters all year round in captivity if the conditions are right. If they're happy and there's seed and everything they want, happy days. You'll notice too, because they're such a ground bird, I've never seen like a painted finch land on a wire when you're chasing it. They're not that. Then they're no good at that. You won't see them hopping through the grasses. You won't even see them hanging off the seed heads unless it's a sturdy platform. They'll feed off the ground. So they'll even court on the ground, and the male will hop around and sing and carry on for a bit. Even the courtship is on the ground. You know, the male and the female twist their tails towards each other. He fluffs up the front of his body as much as he can, and he sings and clucks and carries on. They almost sound like a little chicken. It's adorable. But they do that, and they usually mate on the ground. And they nest on the ground, you know, if it's available. And, you know, in a mixed collection, they do well. In a small colony, they do great. But you'll find you'll have probably a dominant pair. They're not fussy in their mates, so if you lose a mate and you introduce a new bird, they'll adopt a new partner pretty quickly. They do better, like most finches, on their own. You'll get much better yield with your young, with separate pairs in separate aviaries. But they do beautifully in the mixed collection. They're very placid. They're very docile. They're not bullies. They keep to themselves. They're easily bullied by other finches. So they don't bother anyone. And so you've got to sort of watch them, because any other birds that you might have with a bit of red in them that are aggressive, the painters will copper flogging. You know, I had some weavers once murder my all my birds that were red. You know, I was new to the bird keeping thing, and I made a big mistake. So you've got to keep all that sort of stuff in mind, or it'll just break your heart. Normally about 3 to 6 eggs. You know, and you don't need live food to breed these guys, but they do appreciate it. They actually love it. You'll have much better results, but a few people have bred them without them, you know, because their breeding drive is pretty strong when the conditions are right. But ideally, if you can offer them termites or mealworms, you'll go a long way. It's well worth the effort. You'll have better results. So like I said, pairs ideally, but they do great in a little colony and in a mixed collection. Sexing the painted finches is once again pretty easy. The female, she's got a tiny little bit of red on her face, more on the lores, which is that gap between like the nostrils and the eyeballs. You'll find the red there, a little bit on the chin if you're lucky, and a bit of a splash on her belly. But she'll have a lot more white spots. There's a lot of black. She'll have a heap of white spots. Whereas the male, good coloured males, and the male I used to have, Snake got him, but he was. I had people come over and go, "Ooh, when they breed, like I want offspring from that male because the colour there is great." And that's the same thing I thought when I got him. But a snake obviously thought the same thing and thought it'd taste delicious, and that's how that ended. Very easy to keep, simple diet, dry seed, and with painted finches, it's crucial. The floor is dry. They don't like moisture. It has to be bone dry. As soon as you get a muddy floor or wet floor or anything like that, your painters are going to fall. They're going to fall over like flies. In the wild too, where you find the painted finches, you think, where the hell are they getting water from? But they're literally, some generations have never left a certain area where there's just a tiny little spring and they're deep in the rocks, where there's a little bit of water there, and they can access that all year round. You'll find a population of painted finches. They don't go far from water, and even though they're a desert finch, it's funny, a lot of the desert finches, they drink by sucking, like pigeons. They'll suck the water up like Gouldians, like double bars, mast finches, the longtails, all those. They'll suck the water because, you know, where it's dry and arid, they'll actually suck the dew off the leaves in the morning if there's no water around. That's how good they are at you know, getting access to water. But the painteds, they still sip. They still take sips. Same as the yellow rumps. They're a desert bird, so it's a bit of an oddity. Well, to me it is, anyway. So, like I said, in captivity, you can almost breed them all year round because the conditions are right. Like, as far as they're concerned, if they're a desert bird and they're just struggling every day to find a handful of seed, and suddenly they're in an aviary where there's just everything they need, they lose it. You'll just breed them all year round. So you sometimes got to dull it down a bit, otherwise you can wear your birds down because they're in overdrive. But so, like I said, they built a platform on their nest. It's not a bulky nest, but it's well constructed. They like the finer grasses and they love the white feathers to line the nest with. But like I said, if you're dead keen on offering what they're used to instinctively, and you want to breed them and get the best out of them and their behaviour, a bit of charcoal, some dirt, or even if you can be bothered, spray a bit of dirt so it's a bit muddy. They'll use that. Some sticks, bark. They'll use all those sort of materials to build their platform on their nest. They'll build a nice little grass green nest, well concealed, usually in the bottom of a spinifex or in a low bush. But they will nest on the ground if they've got like a thick grass or something where they can nest in. So the incubation period is, once again, because they're desert birds, pretty quick. So 2 weeks, 14 days, those chicks hatch. 3 to 6 eggs, you know, and the more live food, but they love termites. It's hard for everyone to supply termites, but if you can, they're the key. Half ripe seed, throw it on the ground. They don't like hanging off seed heads, and they, like I said, that you won't see them land on the wire when you're chasing them. They're no good at that. They're a ground finch. They'll hide in the ground. You got to look for them. They'll go into hiding when you're trying to catch them. So 14 days. Now then, 3 weeks. You know, 21 days is the normal sort of fledging period, or you know, or weaning period for grass finches. You know, the incubation varies, like between 14 and 21 days for some species, but at the end of the day, most of them 3 weeks, and they leave the nest. And they leave the nest pretty advanced, but they still hop around the ground because they like the ground, and they'll find the cover, and the parents are fantastic. Actually, they're really good parents. So just keep up the live food then, and whatever they're used to. Fresh water, they love to bathe. All finches love to bathe. So if they've got access to water every day, and it's fresh, and it's, you know, it looks fresh. If it's dripping or something, and it just looks like heaven, or like an oasis, they'll bathe in it every day. They'll spend so much time around it. It's like they're drawn to water because they are a desert bird. But they never leave water. Painted finches really aren't nomadic. They don't travel. So where they are, they're grounded to their water source. If that water source finishes, goodbye painteds. You know, and that's happened a lot through the cattle country, where once upon a time the painted finches, their range spread right through, it spread quite a way through a lot of the cattle country. But then when certain things changed, then the water sources closed up, and the painted finches retracted back to their natural sort of habitat. So can't recommend the painted finch enough. It's a tough little bird. Great for the beginner once again. Most Australian finches are, because they are tough birds. They're from the desert. They're hard to kill. So, but the painted finch, keep it dry, and give it plenty of sunshine, and keep everything simple, and you'll do all right with a painted finch. So, thanks for watching, and like, please, you know, if you've got any comments, add them. You know, share, like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. I've got my sister nodding behind the camera, so I think I'm saying the right thing. But you know, like, yeah, let's all enjoy this and really share this knowledge. And please, if you've got anything you want to share, you know, bring it on. It's all about sharing the knowledge and loving our birds. All right, thanks. I'm done. That should be good.